Welcome to Kansas City. Here we are at CPKC Stadium, the first ever purpose-built stadium for women in the history of the world. And that's the reason we wanted to bring our championship here when all eyes are on the NWSL, and it's an opportunity to share our story with the world. And we couldn't be more excited about the weekend. Have a couple of key highlights to share with you all, looking back on this season and thinking about what's ahead, and then excited to hear all of your questions. Want to start by acknowledging that yesterday was the NWSL's 12th birthday. I couldn't believe it actually when I saw it on social media, because the growth that we've experienced over the last 2 years is really incredible. And I think it's important for us all to be reminded that this league is really young and our growth is in front of us. And although it's 12th year birthday, it's actually only been the third season that the league has been independent. So imagine the growth that's in front of us given how short our runway has been to date. Want to focus on really 5 key areas of growth as we think about our look back in 2024 and yet another historic record-breaking season. Starting with our audience, one of the things that we focused on at the league is really building out our infrastructure around data and research and really better understanding our fan, and really proud to get an answer to the question that I've wanted to know since I've come to the league, which is what's the size of our addressable audience? What's the pool of people who are interested and know about the NWSL? And proud to share that that number is 46 million people, and it's grown 36% year over year, with 18 to 34 being our largest segment. Actually, the youngest demo demonstrating the highest growth percentage year over year. And of course, these are the consumers that everyone wants to reach: media, sponsors, and again, going to be the foundation and the catalyst for the growth of the league moving forward. Second theme is around attendance, and of course you all have seen that we broke the record for cumulative attendance in 2024 with more than 2 million people coming through our turnstiles in 2024 during the regular season. That's up 47% year over year. And our average attendance, which we think is also really important to track as we look at the overall health of the league, broke 11,000 this year, with 11.25 thousand fans on average per game. The third metric is around viewership. And of course, we all know that this is the first of a 4-year deal where we brought in 3 new partners to join CBS, with ESPN, Amazon, and Scripps joining CBS. And you all will recall that a year ago when we announced these partnerships that we had 2 objectives. The first was to reset the value of our live rights, and the second being to increase distribution, make sure that our games are in the places and spaces where people consume live content. And we all know how important that is, because we believe our future is bright and that our future fan needs to discover our great game. And as a result, the impact of what we've seen has been exactly what we had hoped for, with total regular season viewership cumulatively over our season being more than 14 million, with 285% growth year over year. And when you look at just the last 2 weeks from where we sit today in the quarterfinals and semifinals, we had more than 2 million people watching our games across 6 matches in the quarterfinals and semifinals. And we have to remind ourselves that it was just last year that none of our games were available for watch on national TV. So looking at all of that, we're really excited about continuing to build our audience and make sure that more and more people get the opportunity to sample and come into our fan funnel and convert them to be the avid fans that have known and loved the NWSL for the last 12 seasons. The next is around social media. We know that this is where our youngest fans are consuming content, and all of us in the sports industry are continuing to learn how these fans interact with live rights holders like sports leagues, and showing growth in this space is really important as we think about building our next generation of fans. We've accumulated 111% social follower growth across all of our channels and 57% growth in engagement. In a world where there's so much content and so much clutter, these are really really strong numbers to show the momentum of the league. And finally, the last theme of growth over the last season is around sponsorship. And I think you all know we signed 2 major partners this year in Google and Amazon, and you're going to see so much of their activation happening over this weekend. Of course, we've seen a lot of it already this year. We've had 23% growth year over year in sponsorship. And we actually have a special announcement to share today that we are committed to empowering and celebrating women and moms, so much so that we are going to be partnering with Bobby. Bobby is the only mom-founded and led formula company in our country. We are announcing a multi-year partnership, and part of that partnership is going to be highlighted with extensions around storytelling about moms, and in particular, an annual Parents' Day Award where we're going to get to celebrate the incredible athletes in our league who are also moms and serving to inspire so many people around the world. More details to follow. We'll be sending out a press release. Couple of other points when we think about this weekend, and in particular the Washington Spirit and the Orlando Pride. I've reflected on the themes that have led them to where we are today, and in many ways they have traveled somewhat parallel paths over the last couple of seasons. Starting with on the pitch, both the Orlando Pride and the Washington Spirit both just missed the playoffs last year, and the season prior they were both at the bottom of the table. We think this is a really great illustration of the competitive balance of our league and the ways in which teams can move from the bottom to the top year over year. Of course, that was the story for Gotham last year, who went from last to first and ended up winning the 2023 championship. When we look off the field at attendance, similarly have traveled similar paths, and some of the highlights that I would share is that the Pride since the 2022 season have grown 114% in attendance. And the Washington Spirit most recently sold out their last 2 playoff games, with the semifinal game selling out actually in just 72 hours. This Saturday at 8 p.m. live on CBS, we're going to get to see these 2 teams compete that have really led with culture and investment as the headlines for how they got from where they were to where they are. And it starts with ownership. We know that ownership is the linchpin of really the foundation of this league. It's what's going to take this league to the next level. And having Michelle Kang and Mark Wilf leading those ownership groups is just incredible, and an opportunity to celebrate all of the things that they've done right that have helped them to get to this place. And of course, Michelle being joined by Magic Johnson and Mark being joined by Grant Hill, both of whom are going to be here to support their teams, is just an incredible opportunity to celebrate them and their commitment to the NWSL and women's soccer. And finally, as I think about these 2 teams, the stories that have come out over the last week, thinking about Trinity Rodman on behalf of the Washington Spirit and Marta on behalf of the Orlando Pride, it's almost like a rematch of the Olympics from this summer, and I know I can't wait to watch them play this weekend. A couple of other things to touch on. Thinking about this last year, we have been busy on the ownership front. We've sold 4 teams in 2024, all of whom ushering in the next generation of ownership in the league in Seattle, Portland, San Diego, and Angel City. And as it relates to expansion, which I'm sure will be a question at some point during this press conference, the process is ongoing, and we're really enthusiastic about the final 3 prospects that we have in the process. Those 3 markets are Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Denver. And we'll have news to share in the coming weeks as we move to close with one of those 3 markets. The last thing I'm going to touch on, and then we'll open it up for questions, is thinking about 2025 and beyond. The main focal point for us at the league is going to be about making stars and sharing stories about rivalries. We know that more content and more stories is going to drive interest in the league, give us an opportunity to reach new fans, introduce the game to people who we know will love it. And this weekend is going to be an opportunity to really pass the torch to the next generation. We have with us here many of the icons and legends who are actually retiring this season. And many of those people are going to be at the match on Saturday. We're excited to honor them at the game and also use this as an opportunity to shine a light on the next generation of stars. That actually began this week and yesterday when we announced that Croy Bethune won Midfielder of the Year and obviously Rookie of the Year, despite only having played 17 games of the season, and Emily Sams being Defender of the Year. And this is an opportunity for us to really celebrate how excited we are about the next generation of stars and demonstrate how we're just getting started. The future is bright, and we got a lot of work to do and excited to get after it. I'll take your questions.
All right, thanks. As she said, we'll take your questions now. If you have a question, you raise your hand. If you are on the Zoom and have a question, use the raise your hand feature. Alex, did you have a question? Or just... Yeah.
You mentioned the narrowing down of the expansion process to those 3 markets. I think there's been a lot reported about 2 of their stadium situations. Is there anything you can share about the potential stadium situation in Denver?
Not a lot of details to share here. We're just excited about being at the stage of the process where we are, particularly given all the interest leading up to this point, and we'll have news in the coming weeks.
Next we'll go to Meg.
Hi, Meg Linehan, The Athletic. Jessica, after the election of Donald Trump, I'm wondering if the league is considering potential impacts to the league, whether it comes to player visas, access to fertility, queer rights, all of these things that might come into a play in the way that we haven't seen since his first administration, and what those conversations might look like, especially knowing he has directly targeted a player in this league before.
Whether Trump was president or Kamala was president, we're committed to the values of our league, and we stand for inclusivity, excellence, and unity, and we're going to continue to live by our values and support everyone in our ecosystem, inclusive of our fans, our players, our employees, in every community where we operate.
Have there been any discussions of trying to figure out if additional protections might be needed for players or staff?
We're committed to ensuring that our players and our staff get all of their needs met, whether that's healthcare, other protections around mental health, any support that anyone in our ecosystem needs, they will get.
Thanks, Meg. And as she did, when we call on you, if you could just introduce yourself and let us know which outlet you're with. Jenna?
Jenna Tonelli, Sports Illustrated. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the attendance metrics, specifically how they're gathered, if they're actual tickets scanned, tickets sold, and how you get that information and verify it from the teams.
Yeah, we're really proud of all of the growth across the league. All of our teams report their attendance metric to the league, and we are excited to see all of the momentum in all of our markets. One of the most exciting parts, in fact, is that we've seen not just the teams that have grown in their attendance, but historically, but also some of the other teams that historically maybe have underperformed. This season, for example, 13 of 14 teams actually had more than 10,000 fans at a game, and very excited to have been at many of those games and experience how it feels to have those stadiums full.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to go to Jeff.
Jeff Kassouf, ESPN. To expansion. Regardless of who gets chosen, the runway, the first team that doesn't have an expansion draft, allocation money being phased out. What are the mechanisms that they might have to build a competitive roster? And how are you addressing that? And do you have any concerns about those things, those mechanisms missing, and the time frame that they're up against?
Take the first part of your question first. We are committed to ensuring that they have a proper runway to launch. And no matter what, they'll have a minimum of 15 months to prepare. In fact, because of the robustness of the expansion process and the in-depth nature of the mutual due diligence we've done, many of the teams, and in fact these 3 teams, have begun to operate in parallel as if they could get the team. And so we don't have any concerns about their ability to be ready, and the league is resourced to be able to support for that launch period to ensure that they have a successful launch. Secondly, as we think about a world in which we don't have an expansion draft, which all of our clubs candidly are learning how to adapt to that new system, we are developing mechanisms to ensure that those teams can be competitive as we think about the value of expansion and the importance of setting those teams up for success both on and off the pitch. We are committed to make sure that they could field a competitive team. No.
All right, I had a question over here.
Hi there, Leslie Ryder, Defector Media. You've spoken before on the importance of accountability in the league, especially in the wake of the Sally Yates report. If you could comment on why the league has not started a new investigation into San Diego Wave FC.
Across our ecosystem, our policies and our procedures are available to everyone, players, technical staff, and employees. And through our processes, we investigate and take action on any complaints that are brought to our attention. And we remain committed to ensuring that those policies are enforced, and education exists for everyone to make sure that they know that we are here to support them in all ways that they need.
Do you stand by the investigation into San Diego FC that had cleared the team of any wrongdoing?
The investigations that we've done in the past, universally, to the extent there was any misconduct identified, it was actioned.
Stephen is next.
Commissioner Steve Goff from the Washington Post. This is going to be, by all indications, a great setting for a final tomorrow here in Kansas City. What would be some of the challenges, perhaps, to going to a home field championship at some point? And has that been discussed as a possibility in the near future?
I think there are pros and cons with doing a neutral site or a home field advantage. Of course, if you have a home field advantage, you get the feeling of being in their home community, and that's amazing. Some of the challenges around that would be, this is our opportunity to really deliver what we feel is a best-in-class national event that requires weeks and months of preparation. It's the reason that the NFL holds the Super Bowl at a neutral site. It's an opportunity for us to give all of our partners an opportunity to activate and to help us to spread the message of the NWSL and drive all eyeballs to the championship match, which is the pinnacle of our season. And so we continue to always innovate and debate pros and cons of all the decisions we made to ensure that we're making the right decisions at the right time. And for where we are right now in our business and our business goals, we'll continue to have a neutral site for the foreseeable future.
Thanks. We're going to go up the front row. Steph?
Good morning. Steph Young, The Athletic. Are you able to comment on any movement in the reporting on Mark Lazary and the North Carolina Courage? And if so, I'm just wondering if the league is also having any discussions. I'm sure you're aware of, there's an ongoing allegation of sexual harassment against Lazary, and how much that might be part of any conversations about, you know, whether to take that on board or not.
Any new ownership that comes into the league is vetted through our robust process and due diligence, and that would be no different for that circumstance. We don't have any news to report about that transaction.
Thanks, Steph. We're going to go to Justin.
Hey, Justin Horniker, Talking Soccer. Talking with the Longs yesterday, they mentioned about this facility and the training facility and how they hope that it's kind of something for other ownership groups in the league to look forward to as they kind of grow the league and push the league forward. Is there an initiative, is there thought into the markets that already exist into finding ways to control their own training environment, control their own stadium environment?
There's probably nothing more important than our teams controlling their own destiny, both from a stadium and a training facility perspective. And it is very high priority for me and my office to identify ways to continue to create more circumstances where CPKC Stadium is not the only or the last purpose-built stadium. And we have ongoing conversations with many of our ownership groups, which have now really expanded to the public sector as well, with mayors and governors. There's a strong interest in investing in infrastructure for women through the recognition that men's sports have grown the way they have over the last 50 years because of that seed investment that went into infrastructure. And although I don't have any specific news to share, we will be issuing and are currently working on a white paper that will make clear what the community benefit is, but both from a social as well as economic perspective to investing in purpose-built infrastructure for women's sports. We're also thinking about it from a training facility perspective, and when we look at the changes that have happened just in recent years, only this season we actually brought in 3 cities where our teams are now in dedicated buildings and training facilities in Utah, Seattle, and Angel City recently announced. And it's also, I believe, been announced and to come in the coming years in the short term, Portland, Bay, and Boston. It's going to become the norm from a training facility perspective. And on the stadium front, we're going to work to solve it as quickly as we can.
Thanks. Tom?
Tom Persley with Shea Butter FC. You said that one of the priorities for 2025 was creating stories and building rivalries. One of my favorite stories about 2024 was covering the semifinals of the Summer Liga NWSL Liga MX Femenil Summer Cup here. What sort of plans does that competition have for the future in the league, and are we going to see more opportunities to maybe make this be a more international competition with teams traveling outside of the United States?
I'll take those two, maybe in your question in 2 parts. First, as it relates to Liga MX Femenil, we're really excited for the beginnings of what we have done together, and we think the future is bright for us to be able to continue working together. We are the foundational drivers of the professional game in this region, and we collectively take that responsibility very seriously. We continue to work closely with them on the ways in which we can continue to build on the momentum that we began this year, which was a first of its kind in the women's game. And we think there are a lot of opportunities with them and otherwise. We have regular conversation with the Northern Super League, who's launching in the spring in Canada. And I'll give a shout out to Diana Matheson, who's a former NWSL player, who we support and are excited to see be successful. And it's not easy to launch a league. So we will be here to make sure that we do everything we can to create the environment that she can create a league that will allow for our entire region to continue to rise. As we think about the international game, we have been spending a lot of time with international leagues and really beginning to unpack and understand the ways in which we can collaborate, share best practices, and work together and find interesting and innovative ways to engage with each other and grow the global fan base. We think the introduction of the Women's Club World Cup is going to be a moment that is going to really lift the game internationally. And I think a lot of us are thinking about the ways in which we can lean into that space in the years to come.
Thanks, Tom. We're going to take this moment to take a couple questions from the Zoom. First up is John Lupo.
John Lupo with Substack. And 2-part question for you, Jessica, on expansion. Do you feel like with the historic season that the league has had, breaking attendance records, the new TV deal, do you feel like now is the perfect time to expand? I know Boston is one of the cities, and you mentioned the other 3. And the other part of that question is, it just came out the last day or so that Caitlin Clark has put her name into the hat to be part of the Cincinnati ownership group. And I know you can't get into specifics on that, but is her presence and with how she's lifted WNBA when you're deciding on which one of those 3 finalists will get the second expansion team, will that play a factor in it, maybe sort of like cross promotion or just seeing what she's been able to do for the WNBA?
Yeah, thanks for the question. On the first front, as we think about the geographic footprint of our country, we know that a 14-team league is not where we will end up. All of the men's leagues are 30-plus teams for a reason, and in order to build the kind of national exposure and visibility and media deals that we think this league deserves and our fans deserve, we know we need to be in more markets, and therefore all the momentum and growth and having 3 successive seasons of breaking records is the perfect time to continue to expand, and we're really excited and bullish about that and excited to be a 16-team league in 2026. As it relates to Caitlin Clark, her accomplishments and contributions to women's sports is incredible, historic. It's changed the game for everyone, and she's amazing. Having her interest in the NWSL is an honor. We couldn't be more excited about her having shared her own personal story about having been a young soccer player and loving the game, and her messaging around being a multi-sport athlete is so important for young kids who aspire to be just like her. And the future is bright for how we could potentially work with her or others who are influencers and interested in engaging and growing our league.
All right, one more from the Zoom. Eric Fisher.
Yes, good afternoon, Eric Fisher, Front Office Sports. Just wanted to follow on that. I was going to ask about the Caitlin Clark situation as well. I guess more broadly, what you sort of took away from everything the WNBA experienced this year and their meteoric growth, and you talked about best practices before with various entities, what you sort of learned from their experience this summer and fall, and what you perhaps want to bring into your situation.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the takeaways from the WNBA success are clear. Number one, you have to create stars. You have to help fans to relate to these incredible athletes in order to drive people to prioritize watching and attending games and really reach beyond your core audience. And so that happened for them, and it's resulted in incredible growth for the WNBA, which has effectively been a rising tide for all of women's sports. Secondly, I think the second takeaway, which is also really important, is that this didn't come out of nowhere. I know I've heard Commissioner Engelbert and others at the WNBA talk about the fact that Caitlin Clark has been emerging as a star for 3 straight seasons. Of course, she transcended this year and reached the average American, and everyone, I think, knows who she is and knows where she plays, which is incredible. But it was a build over several years, and these things don't happen overnight, and it takes time to build the kind of authentic stars and stories that will resonate the way that she has.
All right, we've got time for 2 more questions. Theo?
Hello, Jessica. Theo Lloyd Hughes, freelance. I had a question about the transfer budget. Last year it was $500,000, flexible depending on income. And there was a luxury tax, I believe, if you went over. And I wanted to know, is that going to go up? We obviously have seen the cap, I think, projected for the next 5 years in the CBA, so we know what the cap is going to look like on the salary side. But will the transfer budget go up accordingly? And kind of secondary question, with collegiate players coming straight into the league, if they have signing bonuses, would that come out of the transfer fund or would that come out of the cap?
Yeah, I think just a slight reframe, at least how I think about generally our salary cap and transfer fees, is that there isn't a prohibition on how much a team spends on transfer fees. It's only a question of what counts in the cap. And so we have a system where it's really up to our clubs how they want to allocate their budget from a salary cap perspective, whether it's specifically in compensation or how they ultimately get charged in the transfer fee market. We have to have a careful balance as we think about the investments that are made and ensuring that we're incentivizing the right kinds of investments. And it is a very intentional and strategic process to think about how and when you get charged, or in the inverse, how and when there are exceptions to anything gets charged against the cap. So we'll continue to look at that to ensure that we're set up to achieve our goals of being the best league in the world and attracting the best talent.
All right, thanks. And we're going to go right behind Theo.
Hi, Sylvia Bullock, Shea Butter FC. Last question. You spoke briefly, or you spoke about stadiums and you spoke about training facilities, be it expansion or improving what currently exists. The third leg of that is going to be academies. So are there any plans to have sort of a uniform academy system? And with that, what are the protections in place with minors potentially coming into the spaces? Thank you.
I think what you'll see in the NWSL beginning as soon as 2025 is a stake in the ground around the pathway to pro and an iterative process year over year where we'll be really intentional about the place in the ecosystem where our investment will make the biggest impact. It may or may not look exactly the same in every market, and it may or may not look exactly the way it has been done in the men's game. One of the things that we think is really important as we're building this league and have the benefit of doing that in 2024 is that we can learn from the past and make sure, again, when we think about resources, that we're investing our resources in the places that will have the biggest impact and make the biggest difference. I sit on the board of U.S. Soccer. They're going to be doing a lot in the youth space. I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone in this room that Michelle Kang just made a $30 million donation to U.S. Soccer, and much of that is targeting the youth and pathway to pro. So we're going to work really hard to ensure that we're working in lockstep with U.S. Soccer, making sure to complement and not compete in any places, and ensure that all of the investment that's going into the pathway to pro for players, for technical staff, for officiating is all laddering up to what are the most important areas from a development perspective.